One day, a farmer found a little boy, just a few months old, literally abandoned inside his farm. He did not know where the boy came from or who his father was. He took the boy to the village, where he grew up and lived blissfully among the villagers of this Arabic village. What was supposed to be a blessing for the village ended up becoming their worst nightmare, a curse that still lingers even now. The story is filled with chilling details, some so hard to believe you might find it difficult to even imagine it. But trust me, you've never heard anything quite like this one. Hit that like button, leave a nice comment, and let's get started with today's story. Peace be upon you, I'm Ali Ahmed. On the 6th of January 2012 in Khartoum, the capital of Sudan, journalist Haleem Alro Shady began crafting a bold, unconventional idea, one he hoped would one day capture the attention of television networks and newspapers alike. The idea was simple, a journalistic or radio program entirely based on his articles. But not just any articles, articles that are interested in anything out of the ordinary and possibly about supernatural phenomena. At the time, it might have seemed like nothing more than a passing trend, a curiosity for a few. Yet for Haleem, it was the start of something bigger, an idea that could easily bring in money, Jaibai. Even putting this idea into action was simple. He'd just find bizarre and fascinating stories, turn them into detailed articles, and share them with TV channels. Those channels or even newspapers could then turn his work into storytelling programs, much like my own channel, but on television or in print. At that time, the idea was truly powerful, but it came with one tough condition. He had to write about a strange, real-life story that perfectly fit the concept, something worthy of being featured on TV or in the newspaper. He sat alone, staring into space, trying to figure out where to begin this daring journey, one that could lift him out of his tiring, soul-crushing routine and transform his future forever. He grabbed his car keys, hit the road, and began roaming the city streets, stopping here and there to ask the old folks if they knew any bizarre stories worth writing about. Yet after hours of searching and dozens of conversations, he found nothing. He realized cities don't usually keep their mysteries in plain sight. That's when he began to wonder, where could he possibly find a story that's strange, powerful, and still fits his idea? The first thing that came to his mind was those isolated rural areas, quiet, simple places surrounded by endless farms and far from the bustle of the cities. Strange and mysterious things always seemed to happen there. Haleem decided to change course. Why keep searching in the city? He thought. No, I should head to one of the nearby villages and talk to the old folks there. Maybe I'll stumble upon an amazing story to kick off the show. So he left Khartoum and made his way to a village known as Abu Adara, if I got the name right. The village lay about 180 kilometers from Khartoum. What made it remarkable was its complete isolation. No one really knew anything about it, nor why it had been cut off from the world for so long. It sat quietly among endless fields, and even those who loved to explore such hidden places could easily lose their way among them, for more than 10 kilometers of farmland separated it from the nearest settlements. So, the decision was made. He would head to that village, explore it, and live among its people. After settling in, he'd try to uncover any strange story the locals might have, if such a story really existed. And that's exactly what happened. Haleem arrived at Abu Adara village just before sunset actually. He drove into the village and it was obvious that everyone was surprised to see him. A strange car showing up there wasn't something they were used to, and all eyes turned toward him in curiosity. He kept driving until he reached the center of the village, right by the old mosque, the very heart of the place. People gathered around him anxiously, waiting for him to say anything that might explain why he was there. When he noticed their unease, realizing his presence was making them nervous, he said calmly, "Peace be upon you, my brothers." They returned the greeting. "I'm your brother, Haleem Alro Shady from Khartoum," he continued, "a guest among you. I hope I won't be a burden." And that's when everything changed. The people's faces lit up with smiles, warm greetings filled the air, and the welcome couldn't have been kinder. As sunset approached, almost everyone in the village was competing to host him. They all wanted this guest to be their guest. Until finally, the imam of the mosque came forward, shook his hand, and said with a smile, "You'll be my guest tonight." Haleem thanked him warmly. He really did stay at the imam's house, and as night began to fall, they all headed out to a spot near the mosque, an open courtyard everyone called the Arabian Gathering. Most of the villagers would gather there. It was their evening hangout, where laughter and stories filled the air until late at night. Then, one by one, they'd head back home to the calm, simple world untouched by the internet or any modern distractions. But Haleem was exhausted. He forced himself up just to make it to the bathroom. Then he'd figure out where to spend the night. The villagers were all generous people, no doubt about that. But Haleem was the shy type, so he told them, "I'll just sleep in my car. It's easier that way. I wouldn't want to trouble anyone." Of course everyone protested. "No way, that's not happening," they said. Until one of the villagers came up to Haleem and said, "You can stay with me. I live alone in my house. It's simple, modest, but there's a garden and you're more than welcome." Haleem agreed and followed the man, whose name was Sheikh Tamur, to his home. But during their conversation, Haleem discovered something unexpected. The man wasn't a real sheikh. He was actually the gravedigger of the village, and his house. It stood right beside the cemetery. At that moment, Haleem was thrilled. After all, no one could possibly have stranger stories than a gravedigger, an old man living all alone. He must have seen things beyond belief. Haleem explained to Sheikh Tamur why he had come to this village and asked him to share any strange or unusual incident he'd ever witnessed in his years as a gravedigger. What he heard next was the last thing he expected. Sheikh Tamur said to Haleem, "I could tell you about a certain incident, but honestly, it has nothing to do with graves or the dead. People live, they die, and they return to their creator. That's it. They've gone before us and will follow eventually. What could the dead possibly do anyway? The real problem," he continued, "is with the living. Ask anyone in the village about something strange or beyond reason, and they'll all tell you the same thing. The tale of the Wandering Coffins, as we call them here." Haleem was surprised by this talk and asked him what exactly he meant by the term wandering coffins. Sheikh Tamur replied, "By coffins we mean wooden caskets, and wandering means moving or walking, to be precise." Haleem said, "Sheikh, I understand they're coffins and that they're moving, but the sentence itself sounds strange. How can coffins move? I mean, is it some kind of expression you people use for something else?" The sheikh smiled and said, "No, this isn't a saying. It's a real description of something well known in our village. But it's late now. You should get some rest. After dawn, I'll wake you up and tell you everything." He paused before adding, "I'm usually asleep around this time and I don't wake up until after the dawn call to prayer." And indeed, Sheikh Tamur fell asleep, leaving Haleem literally drowning in a sea of thoughts, excitement, and burning curiosity. For he had just heard something entirely new to him. He was only a few steps away from reaching the goal he'd been planning for, and the thought alone kept him wide awake, waiting eagerly for dawn to break. The house Haleem stayed in was literally just a single room, complete with a bathroom, a kitchen, and one wide open space. Nothing more, nothing less. That open space used to be the home's garden. An old man lived there alone, and that one room was more than enough for him. Curious and unable to sleep, Haleem stepped outside for some fresh air, carrying his notebook with him to jot down the events of the day. He sat quietly in the courtyard, surrounded by darkness and stillness, completely absorbed in writing. A faint smile played on his lips. He was happy to finally be putting his plan into action. For nearly half an hour, he kept writing, his old Nokia phone in his left hand, casting a dim light over the pages. After all that time, he finally lifted his head to ease his neck, only to freeze in shock. Right in front of him, just a short distance away, sat a little boy, his head practically hovering over the notebook, trying to read what was written inside. Haleem froze in terror. He hadn't even noticed the little boy before, no older than 8. The child quickly stepped back, while Haleem just stood there, staring in disbelief for nearly 5 minutes. The boy didn't move. He stood there, calm and ordinary, just a child, nothing more. But the strange part was how he'd appeared out of nowhere, in the middle of the darkness, at 2 in the morning. Haleem waited, expecting something else to happen. Maybe the boy would vanish or float away. He was convinced the child must be one of the jinn, yet after all that time, nothing happened. Not a single thing. Haleem asked, "Who are you?" The boy answered, "I'm Hamza. My father is Sheikh Timur's neighbor. I saw you sitting here in the dark, so I wanted to see what you were doing." F-31 Haleem chuckled. "To be honest," he said, "I was so deep in thought I almost believed I'd run into a ghost. I wasn't even aware of anything around me while I was writing, but it turned out to be nothing more than a boy, a curious one at that. He stayed by my side, trying to make out the words, asking questions every minute. Where are you from? What's this you're writing? Pure, innocent curiosity. Until I noticed that the boy, whenever he spoke, used the plural form. We saw you. We heard you. We live in that place." So I laughed and asked him, "Why do you keep saying we when you're alone? Are your brothers with you or something? Hiding maybe?" The boy shook his head and said, "No, I don't have any brothers. Just one friend. His name's Abkar. We're always together." F-31. I told him, "All right, it's getting late. You should go now. I need to finish writing and get some sleep." He nodded, stretched out his hand for a goodbye shake, and I shook it. But when I turned back to my desk, he was still standing there. I asked, "Do you need something?" He said, "No, just shake Abkar's hand too." I asked, "Where exactly is Abkar?" For a moment, I thought maybe Abkar was an object or something. You know how kids can believe in anything, even a rock or an animal, as an imaginary friend. But then the boy's eyes changed. His whole face shifted in a strange, chilling way. He said, "Greet Abkar and pray." Before they pray over you. Then he burst into a wild, unsettling laugh. Guys, the look on his face when he said that, it was terrifying. That smile, that twisted grin still gives me chills. And even the words themselves were just strange. But the strangest part was what happened next. Right after that line and his laugh, the little boy slapped me across the face. That slap threw me into what felt like a waking dream. And I mean literally, not figuratively. In every sense of the word. Suddenly I found myself inside a coffin, or almost inside one, while a group of boys carried it. Each of them was trying to pull it in a different direction. They were supposed to be children, yet they were tall. Freakishly tall, 8, maybe 10 years old, with hands and feet longer than any grown man's I'd ever seen. Try to picture this. It's almost impossible. A child, 8 years old, yet towering 3 meters tall, thin as a shadow. Darkness swallows everything. I'm inside a coffin, lifted by those giant children, staggering forward through the blackness. My heart is pounding. I'm terrified I'll fall as they run through the gaps between the houses. Then I spot it, a glimpse of something I know. The ancient mosque, standing silent in the center of the village. Yes, my friend, right in the middle of all that chaos and confusion, there I was, inside a coffin, carried by tall, childlike figures. Through the narrow slit, I saw the old mosque, and that sight filled me with both fear and confusion. What on earth was about to happen? Then suddenly the coffin was thrown to the ground with a violent thud, as if it had fallen from 3 meters high. Pain shot through me, and I screamed from agony and from the desperate hope that I might wake up from this nightmare. Or maybe anyone would help me, even inside the dream, because it felt too real to be anything else. There was no other explanation. I had to be dreaming. But listen to what happened next. Right after my scream, those boys grabbed my legs, looked in one direction, and I heard a man's voice shout, "Bring him back!" He sounded furious. Their laughter grew louder as they started running through the middle of the village, dragging me by my legs across the ground, literally dragging me until we reached Sheikh Timur's house. Then, without hesitation, they tossed me over the wall. I crashed straight into his garden. If you're expecting me to say I woke up, well, I was expecting that too, but I swear nothing had changed. I was still lying on the ground, every inch of my body aching, torn clothes clinging to me, blood mixing with the dirt. They had dragged me on the ground across the village streets. And even then, I kept waiting to wake up from what I thought was just a dream, because what I saw couldn't possibly be real. I tried to move, but every part of my body ached. With great effort, I stood up and walked to Sheikh Timur's room, waking him from his sleep. When he opened his eyes, I said, "Man, look at me." He stared at me and asked, "Where have you been?" So I told him everything that happened, but I still don't know if it was a dream or reality. Because if it was just a dream, then how do I explain these wounds and my torn clothes? It couldn't have been a dream, but at the same time, what I saw couldn't possibly be real. Sheikh Timur said, "My brother, come inside and get some rest. What's keeping you out here alone in the dark in a rural village?" I asked him why, and he began his story. It all started about 20 years ago, around 1993. One of the villagers was tending to his farmland on the very edge of the village. When he finished for the day and was heading back home, he spotted something strange lying on the ground. A baby, no more than a few months old, barely 5 or 6 months maybe. Left there with his tiny body covered in mud, 1 foot half submerged in the water. The farmer was shocked. Just moments earlier, he had passed through that very spot and seen nothing. Without hesitation, he tore off part of his own clothes and wrapped the child to keep him warm. He took him to the heart of the village and called for the village chief, saying, "Come see what I found." The villagers gathered around, whispering and wondering who this boy was, and there I was among the onlookers. The farmer spoke up, explaining what he had seen, insisting that the boy was innocent of whatever had happened, no matter what or how. So they brought the boy before the village chief. The elders gathered that very evening and decided this child would be raised among them, moving from home to home, until one day he would truly become a son of their village. And indeed, the boy lived there and was given the name Abkar. Every few days, he stayed with a different family, ate their food, and helped them with their work, whether it was farming, blacksmithing, or any kind of labor. Before long, the people of the village came to see him as one of their own. They all became his family. The village was built on goodness. Its people were humble, kind, and noble at heart. But this boy was something else entirely. He was, quite literally, the worst person alive. The absolute worst in every sense of the word. He was loyal and well-liked, yes, but also a liar, a thief, and a cheat. He helped the family with genuine dedication, yet the moment he finished his work, he'd steal whatever lay in sight and quietly disappear. You see, the boy had no one person truly responsible for raising him. Everyone loved him too much, perhaps. They pampered him, spoiled him, and served affection to him on a silver platter. That love, unchecked, turned sour. He grew up greedy, deceitful, and burdened with every flaw that unchecked affection could breed. As the old saying goes, a child's lessons are etched in stone. And so, when he became a man, he carried those traits, the good and the bad, wherever he went. Even the villagers who once adored him began to feel uneasy. They tried to ignore it, making excuses. He's still young, he'll grow out of it. But he didn't. He only grew worse, his behavior darker, his actions crueler, until his mischief began to harm both children and elders alike. One day, we finally caught him and said, "Either you change your ways, or you're out of the village." But then he started crying, swearing he had done nothing wrong, that it was all his brother's fault. At 46, the villagers looked at each other in confusion. "What brothers?" they said. "We raised you ourselves. We don't even know who your father is or where you came from." And that's when things took a strange turn. Every day he dreamt of an old man who would say, "My name is so-and-so, and I am your father." Abkar would stay silent until he woke up, lost in the lingering echo of the dream. One night the dream came again, just as always. The old man spoke, "My name is so-and-so, and I am your father." This time, however, a smile broke across Abkar's face, an involuntary burst of joy. He said, "These are your brothers. They will come to you every day." And from behind him, a group of youngsters appeared, faces of children, bodies of giants. Over 3 meters tall, bizarrely formed, a mix so strange it seems like something out of a nightmare. We asked Abkar, "What do your dreams have to do with your bad behavior?" He simply replied, "They control me." The parents didn't believe him. Until one day, Abkar stole something. When he tried to run, the homeowner caught him and hit him. In a desperate move, Abkar picked up a stone from the ground and threw it at the man. Tragically, the stone struck the man's head, and he died instantly. The blow doesn't make sense. The stone seemed to hit with the force of a bullet. There's no way anyone, whether younger or older, could have thrown it with such power. I'm talking about a small stone hurled with such unbelievable force that it could kill someone. Everyone feared Abkar, seeing him as some kind of evil being. We tried to drive him out of the village, but he attacked everyone. Then, by a tragic mistake, one of the villagers struck him with a powerful blow. Abkar died. And from that moment, misfortune began. From the moment we entered the cemetery to bury him, nobody could control the coffin. We're carrying the coffin, but in reality, the coffin seems to pull us left and right as if the people around us are mocking us. Even the mosque's imam stood up, scolding everyone, insisting they must respect the dead. Yet, as days passed, the same scene unfolded again. Every funeral we cover ends the same way when we reach the cemetery. The moment we step onto its grounds, the crowd seems to scatter in all directions. No one can control it, and walking straight becomes impossible. Yet when we enter the cemetery in a very large group, all for a single burial, it works. It's the only way to prevent chaos. This phenomenon has been named the Wandering Coffins because it's the coffin that moves the people, not the other way around. What happened to you, however, has a connection to Abkar. Any stranger who steps into the village and isolates himself, just like you did, staying awake, sitting alone in the darkness. He sees children, tall and eerie beyond belief. From what we've gathered, they are Akbar's brothers. But who is Akbar and who is his father? To this day, no one knows, and even now, the wandering coffins might still be seen. We've learned to enter the graveyard in groups, carrying coffins together, just to avoid this inexplicable phenomenon. Haleem says, "This story was the very first one I ever wrote in full detail. When I presented it to a TV channel, they rejected it because just one story isn't enough to build an entire show. And what about newspapers? They reacted the same way." So Haleem wrote strange and astonishing stories, tales he had personally experienced or at least heard firsthand from those who lived them. After penning dozens of stories over the years, he quit his job to dedicate enough time to these extraordinary tales. At first, no one wanted to buy them, and the idea seemed doomed before it even began. Then he compiled them into a book, recounting every one of his adventures, and it went on to sell many copies. If anyone knows the book's name, please refrain from mentioning it in the comments, so it remains a secret source of literally impossible stories and adventures I can share with you. I could create a whole series of his stories and call it The Adventures of Haleem. The crazy part? Even though they sound unbelievable, every single one is true. There are witnesses to prove it. You could even look them up and find out they really happened. So if you want to hear more of Haleem Alro Shady's tales, don't forget to drop me a comment. If you want to catch more of my stories, hop over to the channel, check out the previous episodes, hit the notification bell, and share the video so you won't miss what's coming next. You can also follow me on Instagram to see more of my life off YouTube. I am Ali Ahmed. Goodbye.